Welcome to my channel where we expose narcissistic manipulation and help you take back control of your life. Imagine this. You're in a relationship, but no matter what you do, you're always in the wrong. Every word, every action is twisted to make you feel guilty. They constantly remind you of everything they've sacrificed for you, making you feel indebted. And if you dare to push back, suddenly you're the villain. Sound familiar? This is the guilt game, a psychological manipulation tactic narcissists use to control you. They turn guilt into a powerful weapon, making you second-guess yourself and trapping you in a cycle of emotional control. But today, that cycle ends. In this video, I'm exposing exactly how this game works, helping you recognize the tactics, reclaim your power, and break free from toxic influence. If you're ready to take back your mental freedom, stay with me. We're about to decode the narcissist's playbook and put an end to their control. Let's get started. The guilt game. It sounds harmless, but in reality it is one of the most dangerous weapons in a narcissist manipulation arsenal. This isn't just a fleeting sense of guilt when you've made a mistake. It is a deliberate psychological strategy designed to make you constantly feel at fault, always in a state of self-doubt and easily controlled. Narcissists never take responsibility for their actions. Instead, they subtly shift the blame and the burden of guilt onto you, making you believe that you are the one causing the problem. Their ultimate goal? To keep you trapped in a cycle of doubt and guilt, so that you end up complying with their demands just to feel a sense of relief. So how does this game actually work? Let's break down each step of this act so you can recognize it the moment it happens and avoid falling into the trap. Act 1. Planting the seed of guilt. A narcissist doesn't blame you immediately. They start with subtle suggestions, vague but meaningful remarks that make you feel uneasy and question yourself. What did I do wrong? They might say things like, I never thought you were this kind of person. I'm really disappointed in you. I can't believe you would treat me like this. These statements don't directly accuse you, but they hit your self-esteem, making you feel insecure and guilty without fully understanding why. Act 2. Shifting the blame and twisting reality. Once they have planted enough doubt, they move on to direct blame. They will twist your words and actions, exaggerate them, and portray themselves as the poor victim, while turning you into the bad person. Common phrases during this stage: if you truly cared about me, you wouldn't have done this. You are the reason I'm suffering like this. I should have never trusted you in the first place. They may even bring up past events to reinforce your guilt, making you feel as if you are always at fault, even for things that happened a long time ago. Act 3. Silent treatment and punishment. They may ignore you, refuse to speak to you, or even treat you as if you don't exist, create a tense atmosphere, making you feel anxious and guilty without knowing why, only talk to you when you apologize or give in. This makes you feel powerless, forcing you to seek ways to make amends even when you did nothing wrong. Act 4. Playing the martyr. One of the most common tricks is playing the self-sacrificing victim. They will list all the sacrifices they have made for you, making you feel indebted to them for life. They might say, I gave my entire life to help you, and this is how you treat me? I sacrificed so much for you, but it seems you don't even care. I don't need anything, I just wish you could understand how much I've done for you. These statements make you feel deeply guilty, to the point where you are willing to do anything to repay them. Act 5. Emotional blackmail. In more serious cases, the narcissist may escalate the guilt game to an even more dangerous level, emotional blackmail. They might threaten to leave you if you don't do what they want, threaten to harm themselves to force you into submission, threaten to expose secrets or ruin your reputation if you don't comply. This is an extremely dangerous form of manipulation that makes you feel trapped with no way out. But you can escape. To help you identify this more clearly, let's look at some real-life examples. In romantic relationships, a narcissistic partner might constantly criticize your appearance, hobbies, or friends. They make you feel guilty for spending time with others and accuse you of neglecting them. Why do you always have to go out with your friends? Are they more important than me? In families, a narcissistic parent might use guilt to control their children, making them feel bad for not meeting their expectations. I have done everything for you, and yet you still treat me like this? In the workplace, a narcissistic coworker might try to take credit for your work, making you feel selfish if you don't share the recognition. I've helped you so much, and now you're just going to leave me behind. These are just a few examples, but the guilt game can appear anywhere, in many different forms. Because they want to control you, making you feel guilty is the most effective way to manipulate you into doing what they want, without needing to use direct coercion. But you can break free from the game. Right now, you might be wondering, how do I know if I'm being manipulated by the guilt game? This is a question many people ask, but not everyone finds the answer easily. That's because the guilt game isn't always obvious. It's designed to subtly creep into your thoughts, making you unaware that you're being manipulated. But there are some common signs you can look for to determine if you've fallen into this trap. 1. You feel guilty all the time, even when you've done nothing wrong. Guilt should be a temporary emotion, only arising when you've actually made a mistake. But if guilt has become your default state, someone may have planted the idea that you're responsible for everything. Do you often feel guilty for taking time for yourself, even though it's your right? Ashamed for saying no to someone, even when their request is unreasonable? Anxious when someone is upset, as if it's your job to make them happy? If you answered yes, you may have been manipulated into believing you're at fault, even when you're not. 2. You apologize excessively, even when it's unnecessary. Do you find yourself constantly saying, "I'm sorry," apologizing for someone else's feelings, even when you didn't do anything wrong? Saying sorry for setting boundaries because you're afraid of disappointing someone? Taking the blame when someone gets angry, even when it has nothing to do with you? If you always feel responsible for other people's emotions, it's not just sensitivity, it's a sign of emotional manipulation. 3. You're afraid to speak up about your thoughts and needs. Have you ever wanted to express your thoughts but hesitated out of fear that someone might get mad, feel hurt, or judge you? You might be used to prioritizing others over yourself. You avoid important conversations, accept things you don't want just to keep the peace. But you have the right to express your needs without guilt. If someone makes you afraid to speak up, that's not a healthy relationship. 4. You feel responsible for other people's emotions. Do you constantly try to keep others happy because you fear that if they're upset, it must be your fault? Manipulators want you to believe if they're sad, it's because of you. If they're angry, you must have done something wrong. If they feel hurt, it's your responsibility to fix it. But here's the truth. Other people's emotions are not your responsibility. Emotionally mature individuals take responsibility for their own feelings. 5. You give in just to avoid being blamed. Have you ever agreed to something you didn't want to do just to avoid an argument or guilt? You say yes to their requests out of fear of being criticized. You stay silent when treated unfairly to prevent things from escalating. You always back down because if you don't, you'll be seen as the bad guy. If you constantly put others' desires above your own, just to avoid conflict, this is a clear sign of being manipulated through guilt. 6. You're losing confidence and feeling inadequate. After being manipulated for long enough, you start doubting yourself. You feel like you need others to validate your decisions. You're afraid of making mistakes without someone's guidance. You start believing you're not good enough, not capable enough, not worthy enough. This is exactly what manipulators want. A version of you that's easier to control and less likely to resist. 7. You feel isolated and alone. Narcissists want you to feel isolated so that you have no one else to turn to but them. They make you believe your friends and family don't truly care about you. No one understands you except them. If you leave them, you'll have no one. But here's the truth. You are not alone. You've been manipulated into thinking you are, but in reality the people who love you are still there. You've just been pushed away from them. 8. You feel drained, mentally and physically. No one can live under constant guilt without it taking a toll. You might feel tired all the time without knowing why, emotionally drained and unmotivated, anxious, stressed, sleepless, or even experiencing nightmares. Guilt doesn't just affect your mind, it can also cause physical health issues like headaches, sleep disturbances, and chronic stress. If you recognize these signs in your life, stop and ask yourself, is this truly my fault, or is it just what they want me to believe? You don't have to live under constant guilt. You have the right to say no, set boundaries, and protect yourself. And most importantly, you can break free. In the next part, we'll talk about how to escape the cycle of manipulation, set firm boundaries, and regain control over your life. Stay tuned. It's time to reclaim your power. So you've realized that you're caught in the guilt game. That realization can feel overwhelming, confusing, even scary. But don't worry, recognizing it is the first step to breaking free. You are not alone, and you have the power to take back control. The first thing you need to do is accept the truth. No more making excuses for their behavior. No more convincing yourself that they didn't mean it. No more wondering if you're overreacting. The truth is, you are being manipulated through guilt, and that's not okay. Once you accept this, you can start making real changes. Next, educate yourself on how the guilt game works. The more you understand about manipulation tactics, the easier it will be to spot them before they take hold. Knowledge is power. The more you know, the harder it is for someone to control you. Read books, watch videos, and find reliable information that helps you understand how narcissists use guilt as a weapon. Then, stop blaming yourself. If you constantly feel guilty for things that aren't your fault, that's not an accident. It's a result of long-term manipulation. Remember, you are not responsible for how others feel. If someone keeps making you feel guilty for their emotions, that's on them, not you. Once you recognize the patterns, it's time to set boundaries. Manipulative people don't respect boundaries, which is exactly why you need them. You don't owe anyone an apology for protecting yourself. Learn to say no without guilt. Stop allowing others to pressure you into things that make you uncomfortable. Your emotions, your space, your decisions, they belong to you. Another important step is to stop over-explaining and justifying yourself. One of the biggest mistakes people make when dealing with manipulators is trying to explain, justify, or make them understand their perspective. But this is a trap. Narcissists don't actually care about your reasoning. They are only looking for ways to twist your words and maintain control over you. So instead of explaining yourself, stand firm. Say, I don't need to discuss this further. I don't owe you an explanation. No means no. You do not have to convince them of your perspective. You just need to stand by it. At the same time, shift the focus back to yourself. When you've spent so long living in guilt, you lose sight of who you are outside of other people's expectations. Take time for yourself. Do things that make you happy. Build a life that revolves around your own well-being. The more you invest in yourself, the less control toxic people have over you. Don't hesitate to seek support. No one should have to go through this alone. Reach out to people you trust, friends, family, or even a therapist. Having someone validate your feelings and reassure you that you are not crazy, selfish, or wrong can make all the difference. You are not alone in this. An essential part of healing is also learning to love yourself again. You have spent too much time trying to be what others expect. Now it's time to put yourself first. Accept that you are not perfect, but you are worthy of love and respect. Forgive yourself for the times you allowed others to control you. You are not a victim anymore. You are taking back your power. Finally, if you are in a toxic relationship, you may need to consider walking away. This is not always easy, but sometimes the only way to truly break free from the guilt game is to remove yourself from the environment that fuels it. If someone consistently manipulates, controls, and makes you feel unworthy, you are not obligated to keep them in your life. Remember this: you are not alone. Many people have escaped the guilt game, and so can you. In the next part, we'll dive into practical strategies to deal with narcissists without falling into their manipulation. Stay with me. This is where everything changes. Sarah used to be full of life. She loved painting, enjoyed long walks in the park, and always had a radiant smile. But all of that changed when she married Mark. At first, Mark was charming. He made her feel like the most special woman in the world. But over time, the compliments faded, replaced by subtle accusations. If Mark had a bad day, it was Sarah's fault. She wasn't attentive enough. If he failed at work, it was because she didn't support him enough. Whenever she expressed her feelings, he would sigh. "You always make things harder. I just want a wife who understands me." At first, Sarah tried harder. She cooked elaborate meals, checked on him more often, even gave up her hobbies to devote all her time to Mark. But nothing was ever enough. No matter what she did, Mark always made her feel like a failure. Gradually, she stopped resisting and accepted that she was the problem. She lived in fear. Fear of upsetting Mark, fear of being abandoned, fear that she truly was the terrible wife he made her believe she was. Then one day, Sarah stood in front of the mirror and saw a stranger staring back. She looked exhausted, her eyes hollow, her shoulders perpetually hunched as if bracing for an invisible blow. She realized she had lost herself. For the first time in years, she called her best friend, the one Mark had pushed her away from. The moment she heard that familiar voice, Sarah broke down. "I feel like I don't even know who I am anymore." There was silence on the other end before her friend finally asked, "Sarah, when did you become responsible for someone else's happiness?" That question hit like a thunderbolt. Sarah began researching emotional manipulation and realized she wasn't the problem. Mark and his control tactics were. At first, when Sarah tried setting boundaries, Mark lashed out. He gave her the silent treatment for days, making her anxious. But this time, she didn't rush to apologize. When Mark accused her of changing, she simply replied, "Yes, I am," and that's a good thing. Sarah started reclaiming herself. She picked up painting again, reconnected with old friends, and signed up for the yoga class she had always wanted to try. She learned to say no without guilt. She stopped trying to make Mark happy because she finally realized it wasn't her responsibility. In the end, Sarah left Mark. Not in anger, but in absolute clarity. As she stepped out of the house that had once been her mental prison, for the first time in years she felt free. She walked down the sunlit street, took a deep breath of fresh air, and felt something she had long forgotten: peace. Sarah was no longer a victim of the guilt game. She was a survivor, and she was truly living. Sarah's story is a powerful reminder that no one has the right to control your emotions and self-worth through guilt. When you're trapped in the guilt game, you slowly lose yourself. You stop knowing where your feelings end and where someone else's expectations begin. But the truth is, you are not responsible for anyone else's happiness but your own. Every adult is accountable for their own emotions. If someone constantly blames you for how they feel, that's not love, it's manipulation. Sarah taught us that recognizing manipulation is just the first step. What truly matters is taking action to break free, setting boundaries, refusing to apologize unnecessarily, reclaiming yourself, and having the courage to walk away. None of these things are easy, but they are possible. And above all, real love is never built on fear or guilt. If a relationship constantly makes you feel small, wrong, or anxious, it's time to ask yourself, am I in love or am I being controlled? You don't have to live in guilt. You deserve peace, happiness, and a life where you are in control of yourself. If you constantly feel guilty for no clear reason, if you keep apologizing just to keep the peace, if you live in fear of disappointing others, stop. You are not the problem. You are a victim of emotional manipulation. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If you don't recognize that you are being manipulated, you will remain trapped in the cycle of guilt. But you can break free. Start by letting go of responsibility for other people's emotions. Every adult is responsible for their own feelings. If someone constantly makes you believe that they are sad, angry, or disappointed because of you, remember, that is not your fault. Next, set boundaries and protect them firmly. Brené Brown said, "Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. Learn to say no without guilt. If someone demands more than you can give, you have the right to refuse. And finally, if a relationship is built on manipulation, blame and control, walk away." Maya Angelou wisely said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. If someone consistently makes you feel small and unworthy, don't wait for them to change. Have the courage to step out of their control. You are not a prisoner of guilt. You have the right to take control of your own life."